Kensington, London, an affluent neighborhood with rows of grand, historic townhouses, once a symbol of wealth and power. Charlotte Evans had once loved this place, loved every intricately carved wall of their mansion, every corner she had meticulously designed with a blend of luxury and warmth. Their home on Harrington Road was more than just a house. It was a dream, a testament to the love she and William Parker had built over the past 10 years. But now it seemed like nothing more than an empty shell of a crumbling marriage. Charlotte stood by the living room window, her gaze fixed on the golden light shimmering across the street, where people hurried along beneath the biting winter winds of London. The grandfather clock chimed 11 p.m., yet the mansion remained silent, as if it had long given up hope for someone's return. William had told her he had an important meeting and would be late, a reason he had repeated week after week, becoming an excuse so empty that Charlotte no longer believed it. Quietly, she picked up her phone and looked at his last message. "Urgent meeting. Don't wait up. Love you." The short message no longer carried the warmth it once did in the early days of their love, when William was still an ambitious young man, rushing home to share his latest projects with her. Now all she received was a chilling indifference. Placing her wine glass down on the table, Charlotte walked towards William's study. His desk was cluttered with documents related to Parker and Company's new project, but what caught her attention was a single hotel receipt peeking out from beneath the papers. Her heart clenched as she read the name. The Rosewood London, one of the city's most luxurious five-star hotels, where they had once celebrated their first wedding anniversary. The receipt showed that William had been there 2 nights ago, on the exact evening he claimed to be in Manchester for a business meeting. A surge of suspicion, stronger than ever, coursed through her. Grabbing her car keys, she threw on a long coat and rushed out into the freezing London night. The Rosewood London stood just as opulent as ever, its warm lights reflecting off the thick glass windows and polished marble floors. Charlotte walked briskly past the reception desk, struggling to suppress the tremors running through her body. Instinctively, she found her way to the floor listed on the receipt. Room 1207. Her heart pounded as she stood before the heavy wooden door. With trembling hands, she reached for the handle, but she didn't need to open it. From inside, the soft laughter of a woman echoed, followed by the deep, familiar voice of William. As the door creaked open just slightly, the sight before her shattered everything. William, in a half-unbuttoned suit, lounged on the sofa, with a stunning blonde woman draped over him like a feline predator. Charlotte stood frozen, the scene etching itself into her memory like a nightmare. William turned, his face draining of color the moment he saw her. "Charlotte?" he stammered, but she didn't wait to hear more. She turned on her heel and walked away, her vision blurred by tears, yet her steps unwavering. Back home, Charlotte threw her handbag onto the sofa, kicked off her heels, and buried her face in her hands. She swore to herself that she would never forgive this betrayal. Everything they had built together, love, trust, companionship, was now reduced to irreparable fragments. In the days that followed, she was trapped in an emotional tug-of-war between her heart and her mind. She wondered if the years of happiness were worth trying to salvage, but each time the image of the hotel room resurfaced, her heart ached anew. Unable to bear it any longer, Charlotte turned to Olivia, her closest friend from university, now a renowned lawyer. "Charlotte, you need to think about yourself," Olivia said, sipping her coffee in her cozy Notting Hill apartment. "I know you love him, but love cannot survive when trust is gone." Charlotte remained silent, her fingers tightening around the teacup, her eyes unfocused as she gazed out the window at the bustling streets below. She knew Olivia was right, but did she have the strength to let go? Olivia placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, her eyes filled with empathy. "You might want to consider divorce, but first give yourself some time. Try leaving here for a while and gain some perspective." Charlotte nodded slowly, a small glimmer of clarity beginning to take shape amidst the wreckage of her emotions. That night, Charlotte packed her belongings. She decided to leave London and return to the countryside of Bath, where her childhood was filled with lavender fields and cobblestone streets. She needed space to breathe, to rediscover herself before making any decisions. As she placed her suitcase into the trunk of her car, she stood before the mansion one last time, gazing up at the bedroom window, the same window that had witnessed countless nights of happiness. Her breath hitched, but this time, she refused to let herself falter. Stepping into the car, her eyes fixed firmly on the road ahead, Charlotte knew this was the moment she had to choose, whether to continue imprisoning herself in the past or to move forward with strength. And this time, she chose herself. Hello, Soul Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them. Lately, I've noticed a drop in views, so if these stories have brought you comfort, please invite your loved ones to join us. You're more than subscribers. You're family. Your presence means the world to me. Let's continue this journey together. Late afternoon in Kensington, the golden sunset filtered through the delicate silk curtains, casting a soft glow over the vast yet cold expanse of the Parker mansion. Charlotte sat in William's office, her eyes fixed on her husband as he stood before the bookshelf, flipping through a few files, but clearly unable to focus. She placed an envelope containing the hotel receipts and photos on the desk, her voice quiet but firm. "Explain this." William flinched, turning to look at his wife. His gaze wavered for a moment before settling on the brown envelope lying neatly on the desk. The air in the room grew thick, so heavy that Charlotte felt as though she was drowning in it. "Charlotte," William sighed, his voice laced with exhaustion and tension. "I knew you'd find out." Charlotte crossed her arms, trying to stay composed despite the erratic beating of her heart. "I gave you a chance to explain, but you didn't take it. I want the truth, right now." William pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He loosened his tie, as if hoping it would help him breathe easier. His eyes met Charlotte's, but instead of remorse, all she saw was avoidance. "It's Rebecca," he admitted in a low voice. "She's an important investor, and I had a relationship with her." Charlotte felt her entire body go numb. She knew the name Rebecca Thompson all too well, an accomplished investor who had made frequent appearances in Parker and Company's press conferences. A powerful, ambitious, and undeniably alluring woman. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte spoke slowly but sharply. "You betrayed me just for an investor?" William shook his head, running a tense hand through his hair. "It wasn't just about her, Charlotte. Our marriage. It hasn't been the same. You've seen it too, haven't you?" Charlotte clenched her fists, trying to keep her emotions in check. "And your solution was betrayal instead of fixing things?" William fell silent, as if searching for a more reasonable excuse. But in the end, he could only say, "I didn't know what else to do. We've both been so caught up in our work, your design projects, my responsibilities at the company. You don't have time for me anymore, and I felt lonely." She let out a bitter laugh, her eyes flashing with disdain. "Lonely? And your answer to that was Rebecca?" William reached out, attempting to touch Charlotte, but she recoiled. His eyes were filled with regret, but it was clear he was lost. "I never wanted it to end this way. Charlotte, I still love you. It's just that you betrayed me," she cut him off, her voice breaking slightly. "And that's something you can't undo." Years of love, promises, and the foundation they had built together now lay in ruins. Charlotte had believed their love could withstand any challenge, that they were a team, a family. But it turned out all of it was just a beautiful illusion she had painted in her mind. "Charlotte," William whispered her name, desperation creeping into his voice. "Let's try again. We could go to counseling, work through this together." She studied him for a long moment, searching for any remnants of the man she once loved. But all she saw now was a weak man, one who hadn't fought for their love, but had chosen the easier path. Slowly, she shook her head, her voice steady and resolute. "No, William, I can't." She stood up, her eyes cold and distant. "I've spent too much time holding on to something that no longer exists. I won't keep lying to myself and pretending things are fine." William's voice cracked with desperation. "Where will you go?" Charlotte turned away, her voice soft yet firm. "I'm going back to Bath. I need time. and distance. That night, Charlotte packed her belongings in silence. The luxurious bedroom now felt like a shrine to bitter memories. She recalled the nights they spent talking for hours, the times William held her close when she was exhausted. But those beautiful memories only added to her pain now. She held their wedding photo in her hands, William in a sleek black suit, and her in a pristine white gown, their smiles radiant with hope. Charlotte traced her fingers over the glass one last time before setting it down, leaving it all behind. William stood at the doorway, his eyes heavy with regret and sorrow. "Charlotte, don't go." She looked at him one last time, as if to ingrain this image into her memory, then turned away without a word. The car rolled out of London, carrying Charlotte towards the peaceful countryside of Bath. Beyond the window, the city lights faded into the distance, giving way to endless fields stretching into the horizon. She leaned against the seat, silent tears streaming down her face. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had to leave behind the pain to find herself again. The gentle autumn sunlight streamed through the small window of the old house in Bath, where Charlotte Evans was beginning a new chapter of her life. She sat at her workbench in the small workshop, her hands meticulously sanding the surface of an old wooden chair. The peeling paint revealed scratches and marks of time, just like herself, bearing wounds that needed healing. Bath was a peaceful place, so different from the bustling and glamorous life of London. The house she now lived in was once her childhood home, a space filled with warm memories. Here there were no dazzling lights or tense meetings, only the morning songs of birds and the fragrant scent of grass and flowers lingering in the air. Charlotte decided to take time to heal by returning to her passion, interior design and furniture restoration. She rented a small workshop by the Avon River, where the afternoon sunlight poured through large glass windows, illuminating a space filled with wood, fabrics, and design sketches. The restoration work brought her a sense of peace. Every detail that was restored, every scratch that was covered, gave her a sense of fulfillment. Each piece of furniture had its own story, a past, and she gradually realized that even things that seemed worn out and forgotten could become beautiful again if cared for properly. Just like herself. She spent hours in the workshop, redesigning antique chairs, dressing tables, and bookshelves with all her passion and patience. Every scratch on the wood seemed to remind her that nothing is perfect, and that imperfections create the true value of an object, or even of a person. As the days passed, Charlotte no longer felt like the fragile woman who had once crumbled under betrayal. She felt strength in every breath she took, in every decision she made, and most importantly, in the passion that was rekindling within her. One afternoon, as Charlotte carefully wiped the dust from a vintage mahogany table, a deep, warm voice came from the workshop door. "This table looks like a true work of art." She looked up and met the gentle gaze of Daniel Hartman, a local architect. He stood at the door with a calm demeanor, his dark brown hair slightly tousled under the sunlight. Daniel was Charlotte's first customer since she had opened the workshop. He had brought in an old bookshelf with intricate carvings that had been worn down by time. "This bookshelf has quite a long history," Charlotte said, running her fingers along the delicate carvings. "Just like all of us," Daniel replied with a soft smile, his eyes holding a quiet understanding that made Charlotte feel at ease. Gradually, Daniel became her companion during long hours at the workshop. He too had been through a failed marriage. His ex-wife had left him to pursue a more glamorous life in London. They found solace in sharing their pasts, not to dwell on them, but to understand that everyone has their own way of facing pain. "Life always finds a way to force us to change," Daniel said one late afternoon as they sipped tea in the garden. "The question is whether we are ready to embrace those changes." Charlotte nodded, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Daniel didn't try to change or save her. He was simply there, listening and sharing. His sincerity and simplicity helped her realize that no matter how harsh the world could be, there were still people who cherished the true values of life. Their mornings working together, their walks along the cobblestone streets of Bath, gradually soothed Charlotte's heart. She realized that life goes on, and sometimes new relationships could bring the comfort and hope she once thought she had lost. However, despite everything gradually improving, Memories of William continued to haunt her. Every night as she lay alone in her old bedroom, Charlotte couldn't stop herself from reminiscing about the happy days they once shared. One evening, she decided to open the memory box she had brought with her from London. Inside were photographs of her and William, love letters from the past, and the wedding ring she had taken off before leaving. She held the ring in her hand, its cold silver reflecting the dim light of the room. A part of her still ached, but she realized that what was done could not be undone. She no longer needed to hold on to this pain. The next morning, Charlotte took the ring to the banks of the Avon River, where she used to sit and read as a child. She stood there for a long time, watching the swift currents carry away the fallen golden leaves. With a deep breath, she released the ring into the water. It shimmered for a fleeting moment before disappearing, taking all her sorrowful memories with it. As she returned to the workshop, Charlotte felt lighter than ever before. She understood that forgiveness didn't mean weakness or accepting the person who hurt her back into her life, but rather freeing herself from the chains of the past so she could truly move forward. In the following months, Charlotte dedicated herself fully to her work and her new relationships. Her restoration workshop began attracting more customers, and she gradually became an indispensable part of the small community. She also spent time participating in social activities, helping other women rediscover themselves after life's hardships. With each passing day, she learned to love herself more and realized that happiness did not always come from grand things. Sometimes it was simply finding peace in the smallest moments. One day, as she stood in front of her workshop, looking at all that she had accomplished, Charlotte smiled. She was no longer the woman who crumbled under betrayal. She was now strong, courageous, and ready to embrace life with an open heart. Daniel walked up beside her and handed her a cup of hot tea. "Do you think you're ready to start over?" he asked, his eyes full of hope. Charlotte smiled softly, looking at her hands that once trembled with pain, but were now stronger than ever. "I think I am." An autumn morning of discoveries. A crisp autumn morning in Bath was as peaceful as ever, but Charlotte's heart was a whirlwind of emotions. Sitting in a small cafe near her workshop, she stared intently at the screen of her laptop, where a series of suspicious financial transactions related to Parker and Company were displayed. What troubled her the most were the substantial sums of money being transferred to untraceable offshore accounts. It all started when she received an email from a former employee of the company, someone she had maintained contact with, who warned her about William's strange business decisions in recent months. Initially, Charlotte dismissed it, thinking it was just routine corporate matters for a large real estate firm. However, as she scrolled through the financial statements the employee had provided, she noticed a pattern: several expenditures that didn't align with Parker and Company's previous projects. Unable to ignore the growing unease inside her, Charlotte picked up the phone and called Olivia, her best friend and a top financial and corporate lawyer. "Olivia, I think something is seriously wrong at Parker and Company," Charlotte said, her voice tight with tension. "Do you have any evidence?" Olivia asked, her usual composed tone unwavering. "There are large wire transfers to shell companies, and they all have Rebecca's fingerprints on them." At the mention of Rebecca's name, Olivia's tone sharpened. They had dug into Rebecca's background after discovering her affair with William, but it seemed her ambitions went far beyond simply wrecking Charlotte's marriage. "I'll help you," Olivia said decisively. "Send me all the documents you have, and I'll conduct some investigations." A few days later, Olivia called back with news that left Charlotte in shock. "Charlotte, you were right. Rebecca isn't just a homewrecker. She's a fraud. She set up a shell company to siphon money from Parker and Company, and if this continues, the company could go bankrupt within 6 months." Charlotte felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had been involved with Parker and Company since its inception, back when William was still building his career. She couldn't let the company fall into the hands of an opportunist like Rebecca. "Is there any way to stop this?" Charlotte asked, anxiety gripping her. "We need to inform William immediately," Olivia suggested. Charlotte hesitated. Would William even believe her? Despite his betrayal, her feelings for him were still a tangled mess of resentment and lingering affection. But she knew she couldn't just stand by and watch his life's work crumble. With a deep breath, she made her decision. It was time to confront William once again, not as his wife, but as someone who once believed in the dream they had built together. Finally, after much hesitation, Charlotte decided to return to London. Standing in front of the Kensington mansion, which had once been their home, she felt an indescribable sadness overwhelm her. She rang the doorbell and took a deep breath, preparing herself for the inevitable confrontation. The door opened, and William appeared with a look of surprise. "Charlotte?" he asked, his eyes flashing a brief moment of joy, quickly replaced by wariness. "We need to talk," Charlotte said coldly, stepping into the mansion without waiting for an invitation. She walked straight to his office, the place where they had once discussed bold ideas for the company together. As the door closed behind her, Charlotte placed a thick stack of documents on the desk, her gaze stern. "William, you need to look at what's happening with Parker and Company," she said, pushing the documents toward him. William frowned, opening the folder and scanning through the pages filled with numbers and charts. The suspicion on his face slowly turned into shock, then horror. "What has Rebecca done?" he murmured, his voice filled with worry. Charlotte crossed her arms. "She took advantage of your trust to siphon money from the company through shell companies. If you don't act now, you'll lose everything." William threw the documents onto the desk and ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "How could I have been so foolish?" Charlotte looked at him with a mix of disappointment and pity. "You trusted her too much. Or maybe you just didn't want to see the truth." William took a deep breath and turned to Charlotte, his eyes filled with pain and regret. "You're the only one who dared to tell me the truth. Thank you for not turning your back on me." Charlotte gave a faint smile. "I'm not doing this for you, William. I'm doing this for Parker and Company. This company was once our shared dream." William gazed at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I know. I've hurt you too much." After reviewing the documents, William no longer had any doubts. Rebecca had truly deceived him. The company was on the brink of collapse. He turned to Charlotte, his voice pleading. "Charlotte, I need your help. I can't handle this alone." Charlotte hesitated. She knew that helping him meant stepping back into a part of her life she had decided to leave behind. But she also knew that if she didn't act, there would be nothing left to save of Parker and Company. "What do you think I can do?" she asked, her voice calm but still carrying a hint of caution. "You know the company inside out, and you have relationships with the investors. If you can convince them, we can stop Rebecca before things get any worse." Charlotte sighed, gazing out of the window, where the sunset was slowly settling over the city of London. This wasn't what she had envisioned when she left, but perhaps this was the only way to properly close the chapter. "All right," she said after a moment of thought. "I'll help you, but don't think this means I've forgiven you." William nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't expect that. I just hope for a chance to fix what I've done wrong." Charlotte stood up, gathering the stack of documents. "So, where do we start?" William offered a small smile, the first in months, as he finally felt a glimmer of hope for redemption. Charlotte knew this journey would be full of challenges, but she also realized that sometimes facing the past was the only way to open the doors to the future. Charlotte sat on the velvet-upholstered chair in the grand meeting room of the Parker estate, staring intently at William, who stood in front of the whiteboard listing the key points they needed to tackle. This room, once a place where they had brainstormed ambitious projects together, had now become a battleground against a common enemy. "We need to gather enough evidence so the board of directors can't deny the truth," Charlotte said, her voice calm but firm. "I'll reach out to some key investors to make sure they're on our side when everything comes to light." William nodded, his expression serious. "I'll work with the legal team to review every contract Rebecca has been involved in. She must have left a trail." Charlotte met his gaze directly. "But remember my condition, William. I'm working with you as a partner, not as your wife." His eyes flickered with a trace of sadness, but he didn't argue. "I understand." Both of them threw themselves into the work like comrades in a crucial battle. Charlotte immersed herself in financial reports, uncovering every suspicious transaction Rebecca had cleverly disguised under the pretense of strategic investments. Olivia also joined in, using her legal expertise and connections to track down the shell companies linked to Rebecca. "She's been doing this for a long time," Olivia said over the phone, her voice filled with frustration. "Rebecca isn't just manipulating William. She's trying to take over the company." Charlotte sighed. "Then we have to be faster than her." Despite working toward a shared goal, Charlotte couldn't deny the mixed feelings that came with their renewed closeness. William was no longer the distant cold man she had known in recent years. He paid attention to the smallest details, listening to her opinions with the sincerity she had once longed for in their marriage. One evening, as they pored over financial statements in the library, William suddenly spoke in a quiet voice. "You're still the only one who can see what I missed." Charlotte paused, her eyes fixed on the spreadsheet in front of her, though her mind was elsewhere, wavering under the weight of his words. "You know, William," she said after a long silence, "I used to think we were a team, but you made decisions on your own and left me behind." William lowered his head, regret shadowing his features. "I was wrong, and I don't expect your forgiveness, but I do appreciate that you're still here." Charlotte didn't respond. She knew her heart wasn't ready to forgive. The past was an unhealed wound, and she needed time. Yet she couldn't deny that when they worked together, they were a formidable pair. William had always been decisive, while she was meticulous and thoughtful in every detail. It was this balance that had once made Parker and Company thrive. Even so, there remained an invisible barrier within her, and she knew she couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. The day of the crucial shareholders' meeting arrived, and the atmosphere at Parker and Company's headquarters was tense. Suspicious glances, anticipation, and an air of doubt filled the conference hall. Charlotte entered, dressed in a deep blue business dress, her hair elegantly tied up in a powerful bun. Beside her, William appeared composed, but his slightly clenched fists betrayed a nervousness only Charlotte could recognize. At the head of the table sat Rebecca, exuding confidence and sharpness in a dark red suit. "I hope this meeting won't be a waste of our time, William," she said with a smirk. William stood, his gaze piercing. "We have some critical information regarding the company's recent financial activities." The large screen flickered to life, displaying the financial documents that Charlotte and Olivia had meticulously gathered. Suspicious transactions, missing funds, and forged contracts appeared starkly before everyone's eyes. "Rebecca Lewis has been using Parker and Company as a tool for money laundering and embezzlement," William announced. "She created a network of shell companies to siphon money from us." A heavy silence fell over the room, followed by murmurs of shock from the shareholders. Rebecca tried to maintain her composure, but her face paled. "This is absurd. I have never done anything to harm the company." Charlotte stepped forward, holding a thick file in her hands. "Really? Then perhaps you can explain these transactions that were funneled into your personal accounts under the guise of investments?" She threw the documents onto the table, each page landing like a dagger. One of the senior shareholders spoke up, his voice stern. "Ms. Lewis, we need an explanation." Rebecca bit her lip, her eyes darting around the room in search of an escape. From the back of the room, Olivia stepped forward with another thick dossier. "We have already forwarded all this evidence to the authorities. I believe the Financial Crimes Division will have their own conclusion soon." Rebecca sprang to her feet, her voice laced with fury. "William, you can't do this to me. I did everything for this company." William met her gaze, his expression colder than ever. "No, Rebecca, you did everything for yourself." At that moment, 2 police officers entered the meeting room and swiftly handcuffed Rebecca, leaving the room in the stunned silence. "Rebecca Lewis, you are under arrest for financial fraud and money laundering." As Rebecca was led away, William turned to Charlotte, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We did it." Charlotte gave a small nod. "We protected this company." The shareholders erupted in applause, and William pledged to correct past mistakes and restore Parker and Company's integrity. Charlotte, however, quietly slipped out of the room, knowing that a new chapter was unfolding, not just for Parker and Company, but for herself as well. After Rebecca's scandal, Parker and Company gradually regained stability under William's leadership. However, the damage inflicted went beyond the company, leaving deep cracks in his relationship with Charlotte. Once a workaholic, William began to take time to reflect on himself. He no longer buried himself in endless meetings or back-to-back business appointments. Instead, he dedicated himself to making amends, not just through words but through actions. One of his first steps was to buy back their old house in Kensington, the home that once held so much happiness before everything fell apart. William personally redesigned every corner of the house, carefully selecting each piece of furniture in hopes of reviving their cherished memories. He left Charlotte's study untouched, the space where she had sketched her very first designs when starting her career. Each day he tended to the garden himself, planting white roses that Charlotte had always loved and replacing the old curtains with fabrics she once chose. William understood that material gestures alone could not heal the wounds in Charlotte's heart, but this was his way of showing sincerity, to make her see how much he regretted his mistakes and how deeply he valued what they once had. During long, solitary nights in their old home, William found himself reminiscing about their happiest moments, cozy dinners at the dining table, late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours, and the sound of their laughter echoing through the rooms. He realized that love wasn't something that could be sustained by mere presence. It required effort and commitment from both sides. Charlotte, meanwhile, continued her journey of self-healing in Bath. Her antique restoration workshop flourished, bringing her the peace and joy she had lost in her marriage. Daniel Hartman, the man she had met during the early days of her career, gradually became an important part of her life. He was a quiet, thoughtful, and understanding man. Daniel's stories about his past, how he had once failed in love and found himself again, helped Charlotte realize that forgiveness did not mean going back, but rather letting go of the pain in order to move forward with peace. One rainy afternoon, as Charlotte sipped her tea in the workshop, Daniel sat across from her, silently observing her. "Have you ever thought," he asked gently, "that forgiving William isn't about going back to him, but about freeing yourself from the burden of pain?" Charlotte gazed out the window where the soft rain nourished the small garden. "I don't know," she whispered. "I loved him so much. But now, the trust is gone." Daniel offered a kind smile. "Trust can be lost, but that doesn't mean you can't rebuild it. Not for a marriage, but for your own peace of mind." His words lingered in Charlotte's thoughts long after. She realized it might be time to face William and find closure once and for all. One late autumn morning, as Charlotte was organizing her design sketches in the workshop, she heard the doorbell ring. She wasn't expecting anyone, but when she opened the door, she froze. William Parker stood there, clad in a gray overcoat, his face slightly worn, but his eyes filled with sincerity. In his hands was a bouquet of white roses, droplets of rain still clinging to the petals. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice gentle yet tinged with tension. Charlotte stood still for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. The air inside the workshop carried the warm scent of wood and paint, creating an unexpected sense of comfort. William glanced around and smiled. "You've created something truly beautiful here." "Thank you," Charlotte replied curtly, taking a seat across from him. "Why are you here?" William took a deep breath, his gaze more honest than she had ever seen before. "I wanted to apologize, not with excuses or justifications, just to say I'm sorry for everything I put you through." Charlotte remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I was wrong to let my career consume my life, wrong to leave you feeling alone in our home, and wrong to allow myself to fall into a relationship I never truly wanted." His voice lowered, his hands clasping together as if to steady himself. "Rebecca was just a mistake, not love. She took advantage of my weaknesses, but I don't blame her. I blame myself for not being strong enough to protect us." Charlotte closed her eyes, taking in his words. They were no longer empty apologies, but heartfelt admissions from a man who had learned a hard lesson. "So what do you want now?" she asked, her voice calm but distant. William looked into her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm trying to be a better person, not just for you, but for myself." He placed the bouquet on the table. "I've restored our home, not to pressure you to come back, but to let you know that you'll always have a place there, whenever you need it." Charlotte felt her heart sink. She had thought she could easily let go of everything, but seeing this sincere and humbled version of William made her realize that it wasn't so simple. "Thank you," she said softly, feeling a weight lift from her chest. "I don't know what the future holds, but at the very least, I want to live a life free of resentment." William nodded gently. "Whatever you decide, I will respect it." After William left, Charlotte sat in silence. feeling as if a new chapter was unfolding. She knew that some things could never go back to the way they were, but she also knew she had become stronger to face whatever lay ahead. As Charlotte looked out the window, she saw the sun breaking through the clouds, a reminder that no matter how many storms she had endured, there was always a brighter tomorrow waiting. After many sleepless nights, Charlotte finally found the answer she had been searching for. Over the past days, she had come to see William for who he truly was, a husband who had once been her entire world, but also the person who had hurt her the most. His efforts to make amends were admirable, but they could not change the reality that the trust between them was no longer the same. One afternoon, Charlotte met William at a small cafe on Brompton Street. The atmosphere between them was no longer tense. Instead, it was filled with quiet contemplation. "I had hoped," William said, his blue eyes filled with a mix of hope and apprehension, "hoped that we could find our way back to each other." Charlotte offered a gentle smile and shook her head softly. "William, I truly appreciate everything you've done to make things right. I can see how much you've changed, but—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "Some wounds can't heal the way they once were. We can be friends, but we can't go back to what we used to be." He lowered his head, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. "I understand," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I just want you to be happy." Charlotte gently placed her hand over his, for the first time in a long while without feeling pain. "And I want the same for you. But our happiness no longer lies on the same path." Though she knew this was the best decision for both of them, Charlotte couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. However, she also understood that in order to truly move on, she needed to leave the past behind completely. Back in Bath, Charlotte decided to dedicate herself fully to her interior design workshop. She and Daniel embarked on a new project, creating a collection of furniture that blended classic and modern styles inspired by England's historic landmarks. The days spent working alongside Daniel not only reignited her passion, but also brought her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. He was a reliable companion, always encouraging her to move forward without letting the past hold her back. "Charlotte, you have a truly special talent," Daniel said as they reviewed their latest designs. "You don't just restore furniture, you breathe life into it." Charlotte laughed, her eyes shining with happiness. "Maybe it's because I understand the value of old things. They might carry scratches and scars, but they can still shine in a new way." Work became the biggest motivation for Charlotte to regain her confidence. She expanded her workshop into a creative interior design studio, where clients came not just to buy furniture, but to experience an artistic and inspiring space. Step by step, Charlotte built a new life, one without the shadow of betrayal, but instead filled with dreams and aspirations that had long been neglected. She also began accepting invitations to speak at design conferences, sharing her journey, not just in terms of her professional growth, but also her personal transformation and self-worth after heartbreak. Each passing day, Charlotte gradually realized something crucial. She didn't need anyone's love to feel whole, because true happiness comes from within. She learned to love herself through each creative project, every afternoon tea with friends, and each morning waking up to the warm sunlight streaming through the windows of her home in Bath. One afternoon, she stood in front of the large mirror in her living room, gazing at herself with newfound affection. The navy blue dress highlighted her natural beauty, and her eyes sparkled, not for anyone else, but for herself. She understood that letting go was not a sign of failure, but a courageous choice. Forgiveness did not mean returning to the past. It meant freeing herself from the pain. Charlotte had forgiven William, not because he deserved it, but because she deserved peace. On a radiant spring morning, Charlotte stepped out of her workshop, taking a deep breath of the gentle lavender scent carried by the breeze. She knew she was ready to embrace new opportunities, no longer bound by the past. Daniel walked up beside her, offering a warm cup of coffee. "Are you happy, Charlotte?" he asked. She smiled, her gaze drifting toward the lush green field stretching ahead. "I'm building my happiness every day, and that is enough." Daniel nodded softly, understanding that Charlotte had found her own path, a path that no longer depended on anyone else, but was rooted in her own strength. As the story concludes, Charlotte walks confidently down her own path, leaving behind painful memories and embracing the future with a stronger heart. Love cannot survive without trust, Sometimes betrayal is an opportunity for someone to recognize their true worth. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about learning to move forward with a stronger heart. No one deserves to carry the burden of someone else's past. Everyone has the right to seek their own happiness. Charlotte had proven that pain is not the end, but rather the beginning of a better life. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.